Hi everyone, in this video we will understand how to do dependency injection using Spring framework. And one request is, if you have not gone through the previous video, which is Introduction to Application Context, please go through that video because this video is the continuation of that video. Okay, yeah, so let's get started. So application context, right? So we created XML configuration like this, and so we understood, right? So how it is doing the dependency injection using the constructor injection we saw, but we have not seen the setter injection, right? So let's see the setter injection. Okay, so for that what we need a setter method, right? So I have a setter method here. Okay, I have added one setter method here, so which will take the user repository as an argument. Okay, using this also we can do the setter injection. Okay, so for this, in the XML configuration, here we need to do the setter injection. Actually here what we are doing the constructor injection. Let's comment it down. So here for the setter injection, what we do, we need a special tag called property. So using this we do the setter injection. What we have to give here we have to give the name of the property, that is, if you go to the user service, so this is the name of the property, right? So this one we have to give here. Okay, and then we have to give the same here constructor injection. What we are doing, we are passing this, right? So the same way we have to give ref attribute here and the bean id, this bean id. Okay, so it will do the setter injection. But if you observe here in the user service, this is a parameterized constructor. We don't have default constructor, so Java won't generate default constructor if we have parameterized constructor, right? So in order to do the setter injection, we must have the default constructor to create the object first, then call the setter method. So first Spring will create the object using the default constructor, then it will call the setter method on top of the object. Okay, on using that object. Okay, so we don't have default default constructor. So what will happen if you run this, we will see we should get error. Okay, yes, we are getting the error, right? So what is the error we are getting? Bean instantiation exception. So no default constructor found. So there is a problem here, right? So it is unable to create the bean user service, right? Why? Because it doesn't have default constructor itself. So for that what we need to do, we need to add in the user service, we need to add the default constructor, right? Let's add one default constructor. Okay, so default constructor I have added here. So even the super is also not required, just I have added one default constructor. So after adding this, if you run this, it will work, right? So user repository created, user service also created. I have not added this out here. If you want to understand it is calling or not, then we can add using default constructor. Okay, let's test it again. Yes, so user service created using the default constructor, and then setter method is getting called. This setter method is getting called. So this one also we can test adding once this out. Set user repository, okay, called. Okay, and if you test it again, yes, you can see, right, what is happening. It created the user repository, then it created the user service using the default constructor, then it calls set user repository method, right? Then the object will be ready, right? So this is how the setter injection works. So it creates the object first, then it will call the setter method, whereas constructor injection is not like that. It will directly call the parameterized construction by injecting the dependency directly like this, right? This is what we saw, right? Yeah, so this is how we manually do constructor injection and setter injection like this, right? So but Spring has provided a beautiful feature for us, that is auto wiring. So no need to add this constructor like this, no need to add the property like this. you can directly tell to Spring that, hey, if you find an dependency, an object of type user repository, then please get that and inject here, inject into the user service. Directly we can tell to the Spring, no need to use these two. So let's see that. That is called auto wiring. So wiring means what here? Basically wiring means injecting the dependency. So auto wiring means automatically injecting the dependency. So here actually we are doing manually. Here we are doing wiring only, not auto wiring. So auto wiring means Spring has to automatically detect the dependency and it has to automatically inject the dependency. So this is called auto wiring. Okay. So here we have one special attribute called auto wire. So this auto wire will take 5 different values: default, no, by name, by type, constructor. All these 5 we will understand now. So default is nothing but default behavior of auto wire. The default behavior of auto wire is no. So when we say auto wire equals to no, it won't do auto wiring. That means that is a default behavior. Even if you put default, it won't do auto wiring. Okay. So and if you see by name, by type, constructor, if you see constructor, if you give constructor like this, it will do the constructor injection. So what it will check is, in the user service we have the constructor which is taking the dependency user repository. So what it will do is, in the configuration file it will find out the user repository object, and that object it will inject automatically into the user service class through this constructor. So this is called auto wiring. Easy, right? So it is based on the constructor it is doing, right? So this is auto wire equals to constructor. So let's run and see. Yes. So user repository created, service created, then it is actually doing the constructor injection here, right? So this is coming from this. So it is calling actually this, right? Interesting, right? Now if you see this, instead of constructor, by type. So by type means it will try to find the dependency by type. Type means, for example, if you see this user repository, so what is the type of user repository? User repository class, right? So it will find out whether there is any object created for this particular class. Okay, so it will try to find out. So there is an object created for the particular user repository class, right? So it will inject this dependency by type. That's it. So if you run this one, you will get the output. Again, if you see user service created using default constructor, right? Default constructor, you know, by type means it is using the setter method, not the constructor. Okay, by type and by name are applicable to setter injection. So that's why it is creating using the default constructor, and then it is calling the setter method on top of it. And it will, how it will identify the dependency? It will identify by type, by class name or interface. Okay, now by name. So by name, how it will identify is, it will identify the object by name. How it will identify is, for example, if you see this, so setter method only, right? So if you see this, what is the name of the property? So it has to inject, right? It has to inject into where it has to inject to this user repository. It has to inject using what it has to inject, using the setter method it has to inject. So which setter method it has to call? So which setter method it has to call? It has to identify, right? So which setter method? So if you come here, it has to, you are saying simply by name. Okay, then it will understand, okay, I have to create this object using some default constructor, then I have to call a setter method to inject the dependency. So here what is the setter method I have to inject? So if you have multiple setter methods like this, so it will try to call all the setter methods. Remember, it will try to call all the setter methods. So if you have only one, it will call anyway this one. So how it will identify is, it will call this setter method is available, right? How it will identify is, in the setter method, after set, it will take this one. Okay, it will take this one. It will take this one, user repository. It will convert into small u. and it will try to check whether there is any bean name with user repository. So user repository, is there any bean defined with this name user repository? It will check in the configuration. So already there is an object, it will be created, right? This user repository, there is a name user repository, right? So it will directly inject this dependency using the setter method. It will call this setter, and what it will do, it will inject this dependency into the, it will pass that dependency to this method, which is of type anyway user repository, right? So this is how it will work. So let's say I want to change this name to 1. Then what should be the setter name for us? It should be user repository 1. Then only it will identify. Okay, this is how by name will work. Okay. Okay, so let's run it. Yes, it is working, right? User service created using default constructor and set user repository called. Let's say if I make it to 1, if I remove 1, what will happen? Definitely it cannot find the user repository, right? Because with this user repository it will try to find, but there is no user repository because I'm doing auto wiring by name. Let's do this. Yes, we are getting null pointer exception because it could not inject, it was unable to inject because there is no, it could not find the bean with user repository, right? So there is no bean with user repository, right? So it could not inject. So since it could not inject, what happened when we are calling this method user repository? So user repository is null. So null, on the null, if you call the method, what will happen? We will get the null pointer exception, right? So this is what we need to understand. Yes, so auto wiring by name also you understood, right? So by name, by type, constructor, default, no. So all this we understood now. So auto wiring has these flavors. Okay, yes. Now this is using XML configuration. Okay, with the Java configuration, how can we do it? Okay, can we understand? Yes, yes. So we'll go to this. So this is our Java configuration file we have created in our previous video, right? Yes. So here also I want to do auto wiring. How can we do? So first, before auto wiring, how can you do setter injection here? I want to do setter injection on the user service, right? So basically, how do we do it? So simple. User service equals to no user service. So using default constructor, then I have to call the setter method on it. So this is how we need to do in Java configuration. Okay, and you want to call this method is already there, so we have to do like this. Then we have to return the user service like this. So this is how generally we do. Okay, remember in Java configuration, if you want to do setter injection, this is the only way we have. We don't have any auto wiring concept for the setter injection, okay, in Java configuration. Okay, so let's run it. But before running it, we have to read the application configuration, this one, right? So let's comment this one and let's uncomment this one. Let's import it. Yes, this one also. Perfect, right? Let's run it. Yes, so it's the same scenario. User service created using default constructor and we are calling the setter method, right? So this is manually we are doing. So for setter injection in Java configuration, this is the only way we can do. But for constructor injection, we have auto wiring concept here also. Okay, so what we can do is we can actually pass user repository like this, and this user repository you can actually pass this and directly you can return. That's it. And will it automatically detect this user repository? Yes, it will detect. Otherwise we can use one special annotation called autowired like this. Okay, so what it will do is this autowired annotation is a special annotation and this is very important annotation. Okay, this is very important annotation, and this you will see if you join a Spring project. definitely you will see this autowide annotation. This is very famous annotation. Okay, this is something special annotation for autowiring we use using Java configuration or annotation based configuration. Okay, anyway, so autowired. So what it will do is, whenever Spring will check autowide on the method, and whatever the arguments are there, here we have only one argument. If we have multiple arguments also, it will inject all the arguments. It will try to find out all, and it will inject all the dependencies using this constructor, using this method. So what it will do is, it will try to find out user repository by type. So this autowide annotation by type, it will do, by default it will do by type. So it will see, so what it needs, user repository it needs. So user repository is there, yes, it is there, right? It is there, right? We are actually returning an object of type user repository, right? Yes, it is created already. So that user repository, if it is not already created, it will create it and it will inject by calling this method. So we can actually test this. Okay, yes, so user repository created, user service created, right? Now this time it is using the parameterized constructor, right? And you know, from Spring 4 onwards, no need to use this annotation for constructor injection. What it will do is, it will automatically, when it detects this, it will automatically get the dependency and it will inject here. Okay, yes, it is doing, right? It is not giving any error. So whenever you go to the Spring project, and if you don't see autowide here, and don't get confused, oh, without autowide how it is injecting, don't get confused. It will allow like this, because it has to call this method and it finds a dependency is required. Definitely it will try to check whether this object is available. Then if it is there, it will inject that. If it is not there, it will create a new one, but the definition we have to write already like this, otherwise it will fail. Okay, how it will fail? Let's say if I comment this one like this. Okay, so user repository we are not creating. So now what it will do, we will see. Yes, we are getting one exception, right? What is the exception we are getting? No such bean definition exception, right? So what does it mean? So the user repository is not available. That's what it is complaining. No qualifying bean of type user repository available, right? Expecting at least one bean which qualifies as autowire candidate. Dependency annotations. Okay, so this is what it will give complaint. So that's why we have to define this kind of errors, exceptions also you will be seeing while developing. Okay, you must make sure that the dependency exists. Okay, so this is in Java configuration. This is how we do autowiring. Okay, we can, and also you can also pass autowire like this, because why Spring is enabling like this is, if you have multiple arguments, if I don't want to autowire other arguments, then you can autowire the specific argument like this. This is also valid. This is also completely valid. Okay, this is how you can do the autowiring in Java configuration. Okay, and in next what we will do is annotation based configuration. How do we do autowiring? We will see. Okay, yes, so how do we approach in annotation based configuration, right? First of all, we will comment this. Okay, then I want to do component scanning, right? Component scan, this one we discussed, right? We have base packages, and in flower basis I can give the package, the source package, that is Spring demo. So it will automatically scan. So in order to scan, it will scan all the classes with @component annotation, right? So do we have those on repository? We don't have, so let's add it. And do we have that on user service? We don't have, so let's add it. So it needs again default constructor, right? For setter injection it needs default constructor. For constructor injection it needs, anyway we have, anyway we are good. So what next? We are done. Component scanning we are doing, these are getting created. Okay, fine. Now let's test it. So what will happen, we will see. It is giving some exception, null pointer exception. That means user repository is not getting created. So here only we are getting the null pointer exception. That means user repository is not injected. Why? Because we are not auto wiring it, right? How does it know that which one it has to inject, which constructor it has to call? It doesn't know. So by default, what it is doing, it is by default it is creating object with user service constructor, right? Then then that's it. Even if it calls setter method, we don't have user repository, right? So it doesn't know. So it has just created this, that's it. Even it did not call this method also. Setup, do we have that sys out here? No, right? Set user repository is not there here, right? We have only user service created using default constructor. That means it has created this, that's it. Because we have the component, right, at the rate component, right? That's why it is able to create, but it has not injected user repository. So what we can do here, we have multiple options. The first option is if you want to choose constructor, auto wiring, then simple constructor injection. If you want to use simple on constructor, you have to add like this, auto wired. So it will do the constructor injection. Beautiful, right? Now let's see. Yes, user repository created, user service created, and that's it. User repository is available now. It injected it. Perfect, right? Now, and this one I can also apply on setter method like this. Then it will scan all the setter methods with auto wired. Then what it will do, it will make sure call the setter method after creating the object. That's it. It created using default constructor and setter method is called, right? If you don't have auto wired, it won't call the setter method. So this is what auto wired we need to understand. It will scan all the methods with auto wired annotation and it will call all those methods, setter methods. And you know, one more special thing is that we can apply this auto wired directly on the field also like this. So in this case we don't need setter method also. We can happily remove this. See, now setter method won't be calling. See, setter method is calling, no, right? We have user repository created, user service created using default constructor, but there is no this statement, right? That means it is not getting called. So this is not even required. So that's why in projects you will be seeing no setter methods. Directly they will be applying on the field itself like this. This is called field injection in Spring. It is not using setter method. Okay, so we can get rid of setter method. Hence we are reducing the number of lines in the code, right? So this is interesting, right? So this is how user auto wired we can use in the annotation based configuration. This is very important. Now the interesting thing is that sometimes, let's say user repository is not available. For example, user repository is not available. That means I am removing the at the rate component here. It won't create, right? It won't create, right? So it won't create the user repository object. There is no user repository object. So how can it inject it? How can the Spring inject the user repository? Definitely it will fail, right? We will see what is the exception we will get. So what is the exception we are getting? No such bean definition exception. So no qualifying bean of type repository, user repository, right? Expected at least one bean which qualifies as auto wired candidate. That's it. So by default auto wired is required equals to true. That means dependency is mandatory. If there is no this, definitely it will give exception. But I don't want this exception. If there is no user repository created, I don't want this exception. Means what you can do is you have an option here, required equals to false. You can say by default it is required equals to true by default. That's why we got this exception. If you don't want this exception, that means if you want to make this dependency as optional, without this also you want to go ahead, then you can have required equals to false over here. This one also you will be seeing sometimes. Okay, let's run it. But what will happen? It will do okay, but when you call this method, definitely you will get null pointer exception because user repository is null, right? Because it is unable to inject the dependency. right? It is giving the null pointer exception, but this time we are not getting that exception, no such bean definition exception, right? Yes, this is what we need to understand. Okay, let's remove this. So anyway, congratulations, you learned how we can do auto wiring. It is very interesting, right, in Spring Framework. Okay, now one interesting thing is that this is very important. Normally we don't do like this using classes. We create interfaces and then we implement the interfaces using different implementation classes, right? So for that we don't need we should create one interface and then we need to have implementations. So let's do one thing. This user repository, instead of creating like this, let's create one interface, then let's create one class. So what I will do is I will change it to, let's say, Indian users repository, like this. Okay, see, this is very important, please concentrate. Rename file. One interview questions you will expect on this. Recently I was asked this, Indian users repository, and we have to rename the file. Yeah, it is there, Indian users repository is there, right? So this one, user repository. So this one I want to make it to interface. Right? Okay, let's make it cleaner. Yes, this is an interface and we have an implementation. So implementing that interface, implements user repository. Okay, that's it. So now basically this is a component, right? This is the component, right? So if you see this, I'm saying auto wire this one. So what it will do, it will find out all the objects of type user repository. So Indian user repository is also of type user repository, right? So definitely it will inject this, right? We can test it. Yes, it is doing that, right? So setter injection only. So setter injection in the sense it is a field injection, right? Using the default constructor it is creating, then it is using the setter injection, sorry, the field injection. So this is okay, we are good. So by default it is doing this. Let's say tomorrow I want to create one more implementation for the user repository. Let's say this is US users repository. So this time this will have US users. Okay, let's say Jonathan, before Jim, Caffrey. Okay, these are US users. So I have two implementations, one is Indian users, other one is US users. So I have two objects being created by Spring, but both are of type user repository only, right? So what will happen? So how does Spring know that it has to inject which one it has to inject here? Okay, which one it has to inject here? How does it know? So he doesn't know, because there are two beans, right, of type this. So we'll run and see. Yes, we are getting no unique bean definition exception. So no unique bean definition exception. So what it is saying we will understand. Okay, no qualifying bean of type user repository available, expected single matching bean but found two. What are those two? Indian users repository and US users repository. So which one it has to consider? It doesn't know. That's why it is giving the exception. So in this case, in such cases, what normally we do is, once we create the first one, by default, if I want to use by default by default, if I don't mention anything here, that means I want this particular US users repository, I want only this particular Indian users repository. If I am not mentioning over here, by default which one it has to inject. So we can define that default dependency. So how we can do, for example, I want to go with the direct by default Indian users repository only I want to use. So in that case we have a special annotation, that is primary. So this primary annotation, what it will do is, Spring can understand, okay, this is the primary one. So if you have multiple dependencies, then it will try to find out, okay, the annotation, the class with primary annotation, and this one only it will inject. Okay, now let's understand this. Let's run this. See, Indian users I am getting, right? That means it is injecting this one. For example, if I remove this from here, I will make US users repository as primary, let's say. So in this case I am getting the US users, right? So this primary annotation is also important to define the default one. If you have multiple implementations, to define the default one we have primary. Okay, now default is US users, let's say. Now I have a requirement, I don't want to go with the default one, I want a special, some Indian users only I want here. So in that case again we have one more annotation called qualifier. So this qualifier annotation will take an argument which is the bean name. That means I want Indian users repository, right? So what is the bean name created by Spring for this particular class? It is nothing but the class name only, but with the small letter. So what it will be is, where is that service, right? Yeah, with starting letter will be small. So this will be the bean name by default. This is the default behavior. Bean name will be the same as class name, but with the small letter. So this, what will happen now, we are telling to the Spring, hey, I want this particular object only to inject into this user repository. Okay, you can apply this qualifier on constructor also, on setter method also. So this is setter method, right? So this is a constructor, right? Yes. So we can also apply this on setter method also, remember. Okay, not only on the field, we can apply this on wherever we can apply autowire, all the places you can apply qualifier. Remember, even in the Java configuration also, here also you can apply qualifier. Okay, yes, where is that? Yeah, so now it will work, it will fetch the Indian users only now. Yes, it is fetching the Indian users only, right? So this is about the qualifier. Congratulations, today you have learned one important thing, that resolving the conflicts with auto wiring. If you have multiple objects implementing the same interface, then definitely if you want to choose a particular one, you have to go with the qualifier. And if you want to define a default one, then you have to go with the primary annotation. Interesting, right? So this is what you need to understand. So what we have learned so far, how we can do auto wiring in XML configuration, by name, by type we understood, right? But remember, auto-wired annotation will do by type by default, and if you want to go with by name, you have to use the qualifier along with this. So it is doing by name only, right? Yes. And you know, if you don't specify qualifier also, even if the type is not matched, it will try to find the bean name and it will inject. Okay, that is also possible by default. Okay, now we understood what is auto wiring, how we can do auto wiring in XML, and how we can do auto wiring in Java configuration, annotation based configuration, and also we know how to resolve the conflicts, right? If you have multiple implementations for the same interface, how we can choose the particular implementation also we know now using the qualifier. Recently I was asked this question, so I simply said using the qualifier we can resolve, or we can use @primary annotation to resolve, to make a particular object as a default dependency. Simple, interviewer is happy. Okay, now one more important thing is that, okay, we are doing, it's very important, concentrate. So we have two ways of injection now, right? So anyway, the setter and field injections are both are same only, but in the setter method, setter injection we have a setter method, in the field injection we don't have a setter method. That is the only difference. But if you have to choose between constructor injection and setter injection, constructor injection and setter injection, which one you will choose? This is very important. You are defining a new class and you are defining a dependency, and you want to go with constructor injection or setter injection. Which one you want to choose? This is a very important question in interview. So that depends on the kind of dependency we are using. The first thing we have to think is whether my class user service can survive without user repository. That way we have to think. That means, can I go ahead with user service without user repository? That means without, for example, if user repository is not available, without user repository, can I go ahead? If you are able to go ahead, then go with the setter injection. That is okay. But without user repository, I don't want to go ahead. That means user service doesn't want to go ahead without user repository. Then it is better to choose constructor injection, because constructor injection will make sure that this object is created only if the dependency is available, right? So if you don't want to create the object, if there is no dependency, then use the constructor injection only. So in case of mandatory dependencies, we have to choose constructor injection. So without user repository, I don't want to create user service, then definitely you have to use constructor injection only. This is one point. The other point is immutability. Let's say I want to make user service immutable, but it needs the dependency user repository. So how can we do it? It is only possible with the constructor injection. How? Because with the constructor injection, we are creating the object only once. Later we should not modify, right? But if you use a setter injection, definitely after creating the object, we are modifying it to inject the dependency, right? So we are actually modifying it to inject the dependency in case of setter or field injection. But in case of constructor, we are not modifying it again. While creating itself, we are injecting the dependency. So once it is created, we cannot modify it, right? So that's why if you want immutability, then go for the constructor injection only. This is very important. These two are very important points you have to remember. In case of mandatory dependencies and in case of immutability, go ahead with the constructor injection. If you don't want them, go with the setter injection. So setter injection facilitates the optional dependencies. That means if this dependency is not that important, without this I want to create the object, then go with the setter injection. Okay, let's see this in a slide. Okay, yeah, so in this slide, just we will go through the differences. Just whatever we discussed, those are only available here. Just we'll see. In constructor injection, dependencies are provided through the class constructor. We know dependencies are typically passed as arguments to the constructor. We know it ensures that the object being created is in a fully initialized state before it is written. That is true. Constructor injection is particularly useful when a class has mandatory dependencies. This is what we understood, right? Meaning it cannot function without them. Constructor injection can lead to immutable objects, right? As dependencies can be declared final and initialized only once during object creation, right? Setter injection, dependencies are provided via setter methods. We know after the object is created, Spring calls the setter methods to inject the dependencies. That is true. Setter injection provides flexibility because dependencies can be changed after the object is created. That is true. It is useful when the dependencies are optional, okay, or when there are multiple dependencies and you want to control the order in which they are injected. Setter injection may lead to objects being in inconsistent state until all dependencies are injected, right? That is true. So this is the difference between constructor injection and setter injection. Congratulations again. So you learned the difference between constructor and setter injection, but only the 2 points if you tell, interviewer will be impressed. What is the 2 points? One is for constructor injection, go with the mandatory dependencies. If there are mandatory dependencies, go with the constructor injection. If you want to create immutable object, then go with the constructor or injection. Otherwise, go with the setter injection. That's it. Simple, I can say. Okay. Thank you for watching. Keep learning. If you like this video, please don't forget to like. And if you want more videos, please subscribe to my channel and please share this valuable content with your friends also. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.